Morning, and welcome to the Haventree Parent Podcast, where we get a chance to talk about something that's important to us and to you before our kids wake up.
Today we're going to be answering the homeschool question. Can I actually homeschool?
All right, so like you said, today we're going to talk about the topic of can I homeschool? And it's going to be pretty interesting because I don't know, I feel questionable about
You can share what you
the
said when I
idea.
said this topic.
I said I don't know if we should talk about this because it might be touchy.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, prod at people and say you can't homeschool. But if you are ready for the challenge of it, then, or you're accepting the challenge of it because many are not in a position where they're going to, that's going to make this an interesting, discussion.
Well, and I think part of the reason that this is a really important thing to talk about is because, we, even after we posted our first podcast, we had people sort of like messaging us, like even friends, like, hey, I had forgotten that you homeschool. I've been thinking about homeschooling this year. What do you think about this? I'm worried about that. And we had several. I think you had 2 or 3 people that contacted you, and I had a few people that contacted me. And it is because of the world that we live in right this second. It is something that more parents are considering than ever. And in general, I would say my opinion is absolutely. God gave you your kids and you should be their primary educator. And I think, unfortunately, way too many parents pass off that role to somebody else, whether that's, for those that have particular religious beliefs like we do. We pass that off to the church and we assume like that's a church's responsibility to teach them what we believe. And that's kind of silly. Like if I believe a certain thing, I should be the one teaching that to my kids and explaining to them why and answering their questions. That's my job. That's my job as a parent. If I want to share or encourage those beliefs in my kids, I need to be the one to instill it. There is some research. I didn't pull it up because I didn't think about it till this second, but there is some research that talks about the fact that there are very few things that are actually able to be impacted by parents. If you were to have like 2 identical twins adopted by 2 different families, in general, things like IQ, education are going to be very similar, even if they're raised in drastically different environments. But there are a couple of things that do appear to be influenced dramatically by the family in which they're raised. And 2 of those things, there's like 3 or 4, I think, I can't remember all of them at the moment, but 2 really stood out to me. And they have to do with religious beliefs and political ideals. Those 2 things are heavily determined by the type of family and home that you're brought up in, whereas so many other things are not. At the end of the day, the whole idea of nature versus nurture, so many of those other things that we seek to impact and we hope to impact, and certainly we have some impact on, we can give our kids certain opportunities, or encourage them in certain ways. But at the end of the day, those are 2 of the big things that actually are dramatically impacted by parents and environment. So I think that it's really important as parents that we don't give up that role, that we don't pass it off to somebody else. And in the same way, homeschooling or the education of our kids is something that should be done at home too. As a nurse that works in public health, I go to public schools, and I have, in the past too, in different roles that I've done, to educate kids about pregnancy and STD prevention. And you can tell, I'm standing up in a room in front of like 30 kids, and I can tell very easily whose parents have talked to them and whose haven't, and I don't want to be the first person providing this education. I'm hoping that parents are doing that with their kids too. But they're not always, right? Like that's just kind of the nature of the beast, that not all parents take ownership or get excited about the fact that they really should and get to have the opportunity to play a major role in what it is that their kids are thinking about and how their kids are learning. So I do think that it's something that's really important, that we start off by saying. I think most parents are able to homeschool their kids. It does take a lot of hard work, though. It takes a lot of work, a lot. I literally spent all day yesterday from the time I woke up till the time that I finally crashed in bed at like 11 o'clock, which is well past my bedtime usually, prepping for school stuff. Like,
Yeah, but it looks beautiful in there. If you go to the dining room, it's all like organized and color coded and everything looks great.
Thank
So I
you.
mean, but I understand like once you're in that headspace of
Yeah.
like this is how I need to put this together, you don't want to walk away from a project like that because like
Right.
if you have to keep stepping away from that part of what getting all the books ready and keeping everything matched up with this is the testing book, that's the
Right.
whatever other book. So it makes sense that what you had to take a whole day to do that. So
Yeah.
that because once you're in that zone, you just have to
Get it all done.
own that and make sure it works and matches up. So
Yeah, it is a lot of work. And so, that is kind of the first thing. If you're not willing to put in the amount of work, then you probably should not homeschool. It is a heck a ton of work. And it takes a lot of dedication and a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. We've already had the conversation that like for the next month, probably the house is going to be trashed, because it just takes time to sort of get into the rhythm and figure out how to organize subjects so that you can work with one kid while another kid is doing something independently, or, when to start with one kid and when to give breaks to somebody else, or how long your child can work before they need a break. Because really, when you're educating one-on-one with your child, you really have to consider what it is that, not necessarily what they want, right? Because it's not about like catering to their every wish and desire, but it is about thinking about how they learn best, because it's going to take you a lot more time and going to cause a lot more frustration if you're not considering how they learn best, whether that's they learn better in the morning or they learn better in the evening. Even some of those things, if you can be flexible with them, you should be. It's going to make life easier for you and will decrease the amount of time it takes to teach them, or to work with them on their homework assignment or whatever.
right, because if you can catch them in that excited moment where they're
Right.
like interested in the activity or doing doing that learning with you, like
Yeah.
you know that they want to read before lunch or something, like
Right.
then
Now that
put reading time in.
Yeah, there is certainly a level of practicality with that too, obviously. We're homeschooling for this year, so it is something that they have some flexibility in and then some not. For us, some of that flexibility has to do with who gets breaks when, so that I can work with Adri while Jamie and Josiah are on break or are working on an assignment that they can do independently. So, their flexibility is really much more limited to, what time they get to do what, and just kind of learning how the day goes well for them. And then too, if there's a day that we're sick, guess what? We can do school on Saturday. There's no reason that we can't. Or if we have a day that we're free, we could do 2 days worth of work in a single day to catch up. So there is some of that flexibility that's afforded to us. Whereas like if they were sick, they would just miss that day of education in the school. I'm not sure what our dog is doing right now. I apologize. But there is in some ways less flexibility. I think the more children you have, or the more other demands that you have. So I do think that that's something to take in mind, but definitely if you're not willing to put into the time or the effort, or if you really value having a perfectly clean house, homeschooling is gonna challenge those things. So those,
Which we do value. We just we try to select like one room to not be clean. So.
yeah, I do value a clean house. When my house is not clean, I start to feel stressed and anxious about things.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people feel that way. I don't think that that's unique.
Well, and this is what I call Katie's like school brain for the next 6 months, where she's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I feel like we go from school starts and she will focused entirely 100% on school, and then we'll get to May, and then she'll be like, "Why is the house a mess?" and start putting things around, or Christmas time or whatever else, and then things get organized. So I call it like maintenance mode or something, where
or like
I'm just keeping the house running while she's like trying to throw school at these kids.
Yeah.
So,
and it like we jest about that. It's not exactly the way that it looks, but definitely like our weekends become a lot more harried, and like we gotta get the house cleaned up before school starts again on Monday, or like, so definitely there is some truth to that, at least in our house.
But there's a rhythm to it. We have figured out. I mean, we were doing that sort of role before because you were going through nursing school, and I was keeping things clean while you were reading mountains and mountains of books. So
very exciting times in our lives. I think another parent, a type of parent that should not homeschool, is a parent who is not able to read. It seems really silly, right? But I think it's important to say. I know of a person who, there are several generations now where their parent was not able to read. They're not able to read, and they have a child approaching middle school who they have homeschooled. And by that I mean never sent them to school, who is also not able to read. And I think that that's wrong, and I have really strong opinions about that. As a parent who wants the best for my kids, I think that is a form of neglect. That's a form of educational neglect, that you in that way are really stunting and limiting your kid's ability. The person, the parent, is not able to text because they're not able to read. They're not able to work because they're not able to read. And they have to move around often because their child is considered truant because they don't follow what the laws are regarding homeschooling even. Now, certainly to homeschool, you don't have to follow a strict curriculum. That is not necessarily a requirement. But I do think being able to read, being able to do basic math, those are kind of some of like the basic things that you should be able to teach your kid. And if you genuinely are not, then you need to kind of think about the ways in which you're limiting your child. I would say similarly, if a parent has a disability, so like, for example, if a parent is blind, perhaps, I would think teaching your child to read might be more challenging. I don't think that it's impossible. I'm sure that is still very doable. But I do think that there are things like that like a parent maybe should consider their own limitations as they think about whether or not they're able to homeschool. Now, that said, I don't think you should consider a limitation that you were bad at math in high school or college. Like, just because you hated geometry doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to teach your 5-year-old to read, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so certainly take that with a big grain of salt. But I think, because of my professional background, I've seen sort of the ugly side of people who say they're homeschooling, right? And they're being neglectful to their kids, and children's services has to get involved. And those things are not appropriate. And those things are not homeschooling. Those things are neglectful.
Well, I think that's what people see for coming up for this year of just like, how are all these parents going to do, all of this schooling for their kids that have never touched homeschooling or, more than a few pages of homework for their, helping their kids at home. Right. Which is, like you're saying, is a lot less work than what homeschooling work would be. So yeah, if that's already a struggling issue for you, then it's probably not, going to be a fun journey if you are choosing it. But it's not about fun at some point. It's about, making sure your kids are getting the education that you want them to have and that they need. Yeah. So it's just we're just trying to discuss the options and let you, have the awareness of, what you could be getting into.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, take it with a grain of salt, like if you're a parent who's like, I really don't know if I can homeschool, like, consider the fact that there really are parents out there homeschooling that are not able to read, right? Like, and give yourself a little bit of grace, I would say, in that, like, because I think that there's a big spectrum, right? And I think more than likely you are able to homeschool your kid. So I would say give yourself a little bit of grace. But I think in the particular instance that I'm referring to and thinking of, you may be able to gather that there were some other issues going on there as well. So it wasn't solely related to that. And certainly there are people who are illiterate that are very hard workers and are care a lot about their kids and take great care of their kids. So it's not really about a parent's disability or delay or deficit. But I do think, in an instance where homeschooling is intentionally or neglectfully inhibiting a child, that's wrong. And so I guess that I just want to make that, really clear, that I don't think most parents are in that group. I really don't. I think that that's a very unique set of circumstances. But it is a really horrible thing that I've seen. And so it's something that I wanted to make sure to mention.
Sure.
I think another parent that should be cautious is a parent that enjoys sending their kids to school, enjoys that break. And that sounds not very nice, right? Like it sounds like there are parents that don't enjoy their kids. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. But I do think that there are some parents who are better parents when they have a break. I think all parents need a break, right? Like we need a break. We haven't gotten a break in a long time thanks to coronavirus, and we need a break, right? So I think all parents need a break. But I think some parents enjoy their jobs, enjoy having the time to clean their house or to volunteer or to do, whatever things that they're doing during the day. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think that if you are able to be a present, involved parent in the evenings and on the weekends with your kids, more power to you, I think it would be much better for a parent to send their kids to school and go to work and be a good parent than keep them home and hate homeschooling and go crazy spending time with their kid and be neglectful or hurtful in the words that they're saying or, whatever. So I do think that there are parents that are better parents when they're able to go to work, or they're better parents when they're able to volunteer or do whatever it is. And they're able to be more present during the time with their kids. And so I think that, if you're a parent who is like that, you may want to consider strongly how homeschooling would impact your relationship with your kids.
Yeah. And I mean, if it's a choice that you are not really, I don't know, you have to have your kids with you and you can't find those breaks. You just have to find a way to schedule, like a way to go on a walk or a run or
Right.
just take a time to get away from that space.
Right.
So that way, like you said, sorry, we've been stuck. It's not Corona. We've been stuck here trying to just manage ourselves and the kids for several months now. And it's
Exhausting.
Yeah, sure. But we take, one or two out to make a gas station or grocery run or something. Right. And just do simple things where and even try to do one of those things without taking anybody, because everybody wants to leave the house as soon as somebody's like, I'm starting the car. We're all going to go. So I'm sure everybody's facing that same scenario right now.
Literally our 10-year anniversary celebration was we got P.F. Chang's and ate it in the car. And we went to Costco and bought enough protein for our family for the next 4 months. That was our hot 10-year anniversary celebration.
Right.
But it was also glorious that we had a little bit of time out of the house.
Yeah.
Because it's like the first time in months
I
that
think my
we've,
first question once we got like on the highway, I was like, so this is the first time I had you and just me and you for the like I don't know
yeah,
longest time. So
months.
what do you want to say?
Yeah.
You know, besides
So,
bedtime, like okay, let's go to bed.
yeah. So it was glorious. You know, so certainly like there is some benefit of that. But like if you have a kid who has some behavioral issues
Hmm.
and you rely on the school to help you address those issues. And we're not in that situation, so I can't talk to it specifically, but I know of, some people who may be. Then homeschooling by choice is going to be difficult. But I think, again, one of the really cool things about the shutdown and the quarantine and the craziness in this world is some people kind of know, like you've had this trial by fire of like a disaster of a time of, like it came March and it was like schools are closed, keep your kids home. And so a lot of parents probably have had some opportunity to attempt it, right? And I would caution you in that, like, what you did last year is not really homeschooling unless you pulled your kids and just said, screw the public school system, I'm doing my own thing, right? Then you did do homeschooling to some extent. But even then, there were a lot of things that we typically do that we didn't get to do because school was closed. We couldn't go to the zoo or do those field trips or those, social events that our kids usually would do. And
that we were so looking forward to doing this year because,
Yeah.
Last year we were still in our own family lockdown because we were trying to just be safe for Kenzie going through high treatments and whatever. So it was like, let's go. We're getting up and February hits and everything's getting crazy and locked up. So,
so if you were, if you fell into the group of kids that was sent home from public school or private school and, that is your intro to homeschool. Do keep in mind that that's not necessarily what real homeschooling should look like. But it also can give you kind of a compass direction as to whether or not certain parts are appropriate, right? So like if you couldn't manage your child, or you were having major behavioral issues and were not able to accomplish any schoolwork with your child, regardless of your want to homeschool, it may not be in the best interest of your child. And I think that in that instance, you need to consider that, because at the end of the day, homeschooling really should be about what's best for our kids and our family unit. And if you have a particular child who is acting out or really struggling behaviorally, that's going to impact your other children. That's going to impact your family dynamics, and it's going to impact their ability to learn.
So the last point to bring up is that for parents and couples, they should be on the same page as far as homeschooling, like we are, or at least right at the moment, because things are going well for us. It's important to be in agreement on it because you don't want to have to argue with each other and then have to go through all this work and setup and not have your partner in agreement to take on that task. So that's definitely one area that you want to make sure you're good to go with the decision. And I think that's the hard part that people are trying to figure out right now is to which way they're going to go or choose to go. And, not understanding a lot of the ins and outs of what's coming up.
Yeah, I would say, you don't necessarily need the support of your parents or your, friends, but you do need the support of your spouse. Even though I do most of the direct education and homeschooling with our kids, and I do make a lot of the education decisions because I'm going to be the one doing the work, I would not be successful without support. I would not be successful without understanding. I would not be successful without encouragement and without occasional help. I need Josh to just sit and listen to a kid read sometimes, or, a grandparent to sit and listen to a kid read sometimes, or do flashcards or whatever. I require that support in order to be successful. And so if you guys are not on the same page, you need to get on the same page before you make a decision. It can't be like, well, I'm keeping them home and that's final. It shouldn't matter what you think because I'm going to be the one doing it. Because it does matter, and you do need the agreement of both parents. So that is kind of the last thing that really could be a reason that maybe you should consider not homeschooling, I think.
Sure, yeah. Because there's going to be a time where, one of you is sick or something, and, you're going to have to step in to help out, or, try to at least not let them fall too far behind, because you don't want that to happen either. It can and does happen because,
part of life.
It's homeschool. So, it's flexible, and you can, ramp it up and do 2 days in one if you want, or, take 2 days off and do, 3 days or something. I don't know.
Right.
However it works. She's done so like that, and I've been like, that sounds great. I don't know if that's the kids are absorbing that much, but they're getting the work done, so great. So I think that's pretty good. But I think I hear the kids waking up, so it's time for us to end this today. So make sure you like, subscribe, follow, find us in all those spaces that you are, and we'll talk to you on the next podcast. Until the next adventure.
Bye.
Bye.